Hello everyone, I'm Beatrice Rinchetti and thank you for joining us today live from the studio at Cityscape Global in Riyadh. I am so excited to be here today with Sally Capp, AO, former Lord Mayor of the City of Melbourne, Vice Chancellor's Fellow at the University of Melbourne. Welcome, Sally.
Thank you, Beatrice. Lovely to be here.
So lovely to have you. So let's kick off. So Melbourne has increasingly treated nature as infrastructure, green corridors, urban forests and waterways. How do you view the role of nature as core infrastructure in a rapidly growing city?
Well, nature is essential infrastructure. And often when we talk about infrastructure, we think of it very much from an economic perspective. How is it adding to productivity? How is it driving economic growth? Often nature has been left to the side of these sorts of conversations. But increasingly in Melbourne, and I know many other cities around the world, nature is a solution to many economic issues. It also drives economic outcomes. But even better than that, you can deliver environmental outcomes and social outcomes all at the same time to get multiple benefits and what I call a fantastic stack, which really puts nature at the heart of essential infrastructure for cities.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that insight. And in your opinion, what are the benefits that you have observed of embedding expansive green spaces in urban growth strategies, particularly for social well-being, climate resilience and city attractiveness?
Well, you've hit all the main spots there, Beatrice. Well done. And you've got to be really deliberate in how you design, master plan, deliver and then manage cities. It takes a lot of thought. We're so lucky in Melbourne because when the city was established 190 years ago, the city leaders at that time recognised the value of open space, green open space, and they called it the hearts and lungs of the city. And I think it's still so true today, and you need to keep investing in that core infrastructure that makes a city breathe. It gives a city the spaces where people come together, where their identities are formed, and we're a big city of people gatherings as well in Melbourne. And you want to make sure that we are managing what are more modern challenges, particularly issues like urban heat island impacts, extreme weather events, and parks and nature actually wonderful ways of managing those events better. So for us, it's part of our history. We're being very deliberate and thoughtful about it to make sure that it continues to be the hearts and lungs of our city as we go forward. And we recognise that these sorts of projects that incorporate nature, green open spaces, even pocket parks into urban spaces have very long legacy benefits for the city. I could give you some fantastic examples quickly, Beatrice,
yes,
of those returns that you mentioned. For us, Parks and Gardens always comes in at 1 or 2 on visitor surveys of what they loved about the city. And for our local traders particularly, but tourism more broadly, Parks and Gardens have become an essential feature. So everything from making sure they're beautifully presented to wayfinding to holding events in parks, those sorts of things have become a real driver of our city economy. Socially, events like COVID reinforced dramatically the importance of open spaces and public open spaces. And for fast-growing cities where we're increasing the density particularly, the reliance on public open spaces is enormous, from places to exercise, relax, reflect as individuals, but also to find a sense of community. Dog walking's enormous in Melbourne, and to drive those social cohesion outcomes that we seek as a successfully integrated city. And then I just want to touch on environmental for a moment. The extreme weather events that I mentioned, we see those in 2 ways in Melbourne. Storms with very intense, I should say, rain events are increasing. Those once in 100-year events are now once in 10-year events. We also have heat as a major natural killer of people, particularly older people and isolated people in our city. And so nature's an important part of both of those. Firstly, we're increasing porous areas with plants and tree growth that helps absorb water and eases pressure on our stormwater system, which is 150 years old and hard to upgrade. So these things are important. Obviously, when we plant trees and create overstory and tree canopy, it brings down the heat in the city and creates cool zones. And we can do those in big ways through parks, in small ways through pocket parks, even by plantings around public transport stops, etc., to create cool zones. And so using nature as a way of responding to those issues is really important. But of course, preventative and being proactive is always best. Everything from more rooftop gardens that help us manage stormwater events better and again bring down temperature, through to Green Line, which is our new 4-kilometre long linear park along the river that does everything from improve the water quality and river health through to sharing more of our ancient traditional owner Aboriginal culture through storytelling. These are the multiple benefits that come from investing in nature.
Fantastic. Some really key messages there, and I know that listeners will be very inspired. So infrastructure delivery in cities is evolving. What role have public-private partnerships played under your leadership in Melbourne, and what lessons would you share for cities looking to accelerate delivery through PPP models?
Well, look, I think at a city level, everything's a PPP because there's always a public element. And if you're not integrating with private, then you end up with a siloed outcome. And the role of cities and city leaders is very much those integrated, improved, better, more effective, more impactful sorts of projects. So in my mind, particularly at a city level, everything is a PPP. It's just the different roles played in different proportions depending on the project. I think that PPPs are absolutely essential, again, for city delivery of projects for many reasons. Cities mostly around the world have the least levers to pull in terms of ways to fund big infrastructure projects, and so we're reliant on those partnerships with private funding particularly. When we're looking at city master planning, we need to incorporate the visions and the projects that are going to be delivered by the private sector and look for ways where the edges are blurred between the two to make sure that we have livable cities and walkable cities and activated cities. So again, those partnerships are absolutely key. So we've talked about funding, we've talked about the planning, and then there's also the management and use of the infrastructure over time that often requires very integrated PPP management. And I mention this term integrated a lot because it's the multi-party governance, funding and delivery, and then management over time that makes the difference between a good project and a bad project from my perspective. And the sooner we start, the better. And I just wanted to mention, I've said public and private a lot. Sometimes we lose people in there. I am a big fan of making sure we've engaged community and broader stakeholders early, that they're involved in the project, feel a sense of ownership, can see their feedback in the outcomes. It makes it more usable. It means it's going to be leveraged and we're actually going to achieve the benefits that we wanted from conception through to outcomes. So from my perspective, we can't lose sight of the people element as well.
Absolutely. And so for cities facing rapid expansion and mega event pressures, what advice would you give on prioritising nature, green spaces and PPP infrastructure early in the process?
Yeah. Whatever your final ambition in terms of how we want to use an event space, for example, incorporating nature adds the most distinctive and, I think, improved outcomes to your ambitions. It is a fundamental, core, essential, if I could think of more words I would, part of infrastructure projects, and should be designed and being deliberate on the benefits that can come from incorporating nature into projects. We have an incredible sporting precinct in Melbourne that is really part of our CBD, and at the middle of that is big green open space. It's where people come to dwell, it's where they rest in between events, or it's where they gather to meet friends. It's where we can marshal people for safety or for crowd control. It's where they gather before the event. It's where they'll gather after as well. So being deliberate about the types of roles that nature can play. I've already mentioned all of the environmental impacts as well. I really feel that the sort of the homogenous nature of big concrete plazas and glass monoliths that we see pretty much commonplace in modern cities around the world has led us to a uniformity that is not a good outcome. And of course, the way to address monoculture and uniformity is to introduce diversity, and biodiversity, I think, is the very, very best of that. So incorporating nature from the start delivers environmental, social and economic outcomes, and it is core infrastructure.
Absolutely, I love that perspective. And so I'd like to finish off looking to the future. So looking ahead, how do you see the convergence of urban growth, climate ambition and infrastructure innovation shaping next generation cities? And what role should former city leaders like yourself play in guiding that evolution?
Good question. Well, look, when you're a former, you're able to use all of the bumps and the mistakes and the missteps, I think, in very positive ways. It's much easier to admit to your mistakes when you're no longer there. But of course, I've also learnt a lot about what's worked well. And being in leadership roles, one of the wonderful aspects and experiences I had as the Lord Mayor of Melbourne was to interact with mayors from around the world, which is what we're doing at Cityscape Global as well. It's absolutely brilliant to meet and collide with those leaders, to learn and then to take those experiences and that expertise back to our city. So I think the roles of current and former leaders are slightly different, but still to be brave and courageous and to push and to drive outcomes when you know they might not necessarily be popular. They're probably not going to be easy, but I've got enough scar tissue now to push through many of those elements. In terms of modern cities, there are so many aspects that are required to create thriving communities, cities, economies, ecosystems. And what I've found, maybe even in recent history, is that we've gone through a phase where the tensions of the multiplicity of those issues and features have gone from being a clash to having a healthy, I call it, challenge to improve each other. I think this is a great thing because it's not always easy to integrate all of those features into projects or into a city as a whole, and we see what's happening here in Riyadh and Saudi Arabia. It's truly incredible. There have to be different priorities sought on projects from time to time, but rather than clashing and rejecting whole elements, more and more experts and leaders are showing us ways to bring them together so that they can complement each other. As I said earlier, the proportion of economic, social, environmental, if we use those as leads, can change from time to time, but we're much better off if we look at ways that we can bring them together rather than look at the tensions and just reject entire parts of those features altogether. It's a long-winded answer, but I really encourage people to keep colliding and look for ways that features can work together.
And I'm sure they will. What a fantastic note to end on. Sally, I want to thank you for joining us today and sharing these amazing insights. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Thanks, Beatrice.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. We are live from the studio at Cityscape Global.